So it's saying starting. Okay. Well, so this is Friday evening Sangha. For me, it's Saturday morning. Uh, what is it? April the I don't know what the date is. 9th, 10th, 11th, something like that. Saturday. And so, um, kind of the question is, um, if you understand what is the basic practice of the Buddha from both a practical position and from a didactic or a, let us say, philosophical or uh, uh, intellectual position, then we have a good way of beginning to practice. So basically, what the whole teachings of the Buddha is at a philosophical or top-down level, he teaches dukkha-nirodha.
Yeah.
Dukkha-nirodha means that whenever you see something that is unsatisfying or unsatisfactory, whatever it is that's unsatisfying and unsatisfactory, do what is needed in the mind to change your attitude from being unsatisfied into being satisfied. That's the basic point.
Okay.
Okay. And on the emails, I say a line from a song, don't worry, be happy, which is exactly the same thing. Don't worry, be happy. Right. So, as we were talking about the practice of waking up, uh, we're using it both as a metaphor and a literal position. As there is the literal physical waking up in the morning that is always done as a process. Oh my goodness, someone is calling. Never mind. I'll just let it go. An 877 number is calling as if that's a bank, I think. So uh, going back uh, to the original point of dukkha-nirodha, when the waking up process happens, the question is, how much waking do we have to do to really wake up? So, there is a stage that happens when we wake up in the mornings, in the sense that what's the very, very first thing that happens? This is the question, because that's the point of waking up. In other words, you become conscious of something, because in the moment before that, when we were asleep, we were not conscious. So we became conscious of something. This is the question, is what do you become conscious of? The next thing that we're going to do is actually to gladden the mind to become satisfied right here, right now. So we can practice then Ānāpānasati. When I'm saying Ānāpānasati, basically that's the Buddha's way of practicing the Eightfold Noble Path. Most specifically, the sati is waking up. Then,
Mm-hmm.
after we wake up, we can look at the kind of thought that we have. Now, what do I mean by waking up here? It means to come into reality, or to come out of our daydreams, or to come out of whatever we were thinking about and come into the senses of the body, including the awareness of the touch of the skin on the air, or the cloth, whatever is happening in the here now. That's especially good to do first thing in the morning, because here we are laying in bed, becoming alert to our own sensory awareness of the body. And so we become aware of the posture that we're in. And in the regard to the rest of the teaching, if we are not then in a posture that would be a wholesome posture, then we change the body's posture into a wholesome posture.
Yeah.
Okay? That in fact, that happens almost every time. Immediately upon waking up, you shift your body to a more comfortable posture. Is that not the very second thing that you do? First thing you do is you wake up and you know that you're awake. The second thing is that you begin to shift the body. Okay. This is, in fact, Ānāpānasati thinking about it. So, what we're going to be doing with Ānāpānasati as a meditation practice is to wake up and take a look at the position of the mental body and then change that posture, change that position from an unwholesome thought into a more wholesome thought. Whatever we're thinking about, it can be slightly improved. And so we begin to have wholesome thoughts, and those wholesome thoughts can generally be about what's happening right now. So if you're sitting in the meditation hall and the mind has wandered away from the breath, we can just come back in a wholesome way rather than fussing at ourselves. We can wake up just enough to recognize that we're awake. And then we can go off into really unwholesome thoughts. An example of that is in the Goenka meditation retreat system. He says, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. And when the students do just that, when they recognize the mind wanders away from the breath, they don't start again. What they do is they hassle themselves about the fact that they had to let it wander away. And they'll have thoughts like, oh, poor me, I can't meditate, or why am I here, or what's this all about? And so we start back into the normal disappointments that we have throughout life, instead of waking up fully to come back really to the here now and be here in the present moment, which is actually generally quite nice. That in fact, when we woke up to the fact that our mind had wandered away from the breath only a little bit, we wake up into desire. And so what we can look at then is the desire that we will have when we do get out of bed. What is it that gets you out of bed? What is it that you want when you get out of bed in the morning? And when you sit or lay in bed, rather, in a comfortable posture for about 5 or 10 minutes and get the mind in a really beautiful state by talking ourselves into it with things like, oh, today is going to be such a great day. Wow, it's going to be really easy. There's really nothing much going to happen, but I can take care of it easily. And so we actually can get ourselves ready for being a winner. We can feel like a winner laying right there in bed. Wow, what a nice day it is. And I can handle this day just fine. And so these are the kind of thoughts that we're going to have as we're waking up in the morning. But this is nothing but Ānāpāna practice, Ānāpānasati practice, that most Westerners think of as a formal meditation where you go to a retreat, you sit on a cushion in a special house or a special meditation hall with special meditation objects at the front with a dais and a perhaps a Buddha Rupa, all kinds of things that people put in as the spiritual materialism. Well, the practice to where really the whole practice is getting one's own mind into a good state, which means to get it out of its dissatisfaction and bring it into a state of satisfaction. So that's the didactic. way of looking at it, of getting the mind into a state of satisfaction. But we have to practice that over and over and over and over again. Well, guess what? Every morning when you wake up, it's an excellent opportunity to practice it over and over and over again for about 10 minutes. Making sure that you're breathing well, making sure that your mind is clear and fit for work. And so this is the way that we can learn about meditation practice. I would recommend that we do that several times a day. That when in fact we can do it also right before we go to sleep at night. I mean, there you are laying in the bed, getting ready to go to sleep anyway. So why not make this a practice? Most people will go to bed with the idea, oh, I've got to get up in the morning. I got to go to work tomorrow. Oh, I've got to do this, that, and the other thing. And as they go to sleep, they've got this, that, and the other thing on their mind, and we call that dreaming. And so what we do is we move from a daydream state, lay down in bed in a daydream state, and then go into night dreams. And a better way of doing that is by practicing Ānāpānasati, practicing having really wholesome thoughts as I go to sleep. Wow, I've got no place to go, nothing to do. I can lay here for the next 8 hours and enjoy the heck out of this bed and this cover. And I don't have to go to sleep if I don't want to. This is my time, and I've got no place to go and nothing to do, no pressures, no worries. I don't have to get to sleep. Because that's very, very interesting is that people normally don't get enough sleep, and so then they get tired because they work really hard and they need the sleep. But if you don't need the sleep, then it's okay to really enjoy yourself while you're just laying in bed at night. That in fact, if you're in a very relaxed, comfortable state, even though your mind is still somewhat conscious, you're still conscious of what a nice moment this is laying here in bed, that we're not worried about anything at all. And so this is actually what the Buddha would call the practice of wakefulness. Is go ahead and lay down and just continue the meditation in the sense of this is okay. I don't have to sleep. If I do go to sleep, that's okay. I'll wake up, and when I wake up, I'll be marvelous. And so this is a new way of going to sleep at night. Is with no intention of going to sleep, but more in the intention of enjoying the night. And if we enjoy the night, then sleep itself can be optional, but you'll get the rest that's needed. Yes, Corey, you got your hand up.
I was curious about the how because I've tried to fall asleep consciously. I've tried to stay asleep, or I've tried to stay aware and awake up until the point of sleeping, but I have no idea how to do it. It's like I've never been able to crack the code. So if we could talk about
a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Here's the punchline. Is that sleep, like everything else, if you wait on it, it's not going to come. If you stay conscious of sleep coming, it doesn't, because you're waking yourself back up looking for it. That's why sleep is a catch-22, that the mind has to lull off. And so what we're doing is that we're giving it full permission to lull off while we allow it to go ahead and go to sleep with the full permission that it doesn't matter whether I go to sleep or not. There's no intention there for one or the other. What the intention is for full relaxation, full enjoyment. So this is so nice.
Alrighty, thank you.
All right. So rather than having expectations and thinking that this is hard and failing at it, like I did with my mom's sewing machine, instead thinking about that, oh, well, it doesn't matter whether this is failure or not. It doesn't matter whether this is hard or not. Let me enjoy what I'm doing right now. As I go to sleep, paying attention to what's going on with full enjoyment. As I wake up in the morning, I wake up with full enjoyment. That in fact, by working with posture in the sense of the various postures that the Buddha talks about is in fact 4 postures. And the lying posture, the reclining posture, is referred to as the lion's pose. You can probably Google the image Buddha reclining or lion's pose, and you can see many different places where they have statues, a lot of different statues. But basically, about half the time or more than half the time, the dogs are laying in the lion's posture or the lion's pose. But I don't think that it would be quite as chic to call it the dog pose. And sometimes dogs are laying on their back, and sometimes they're laying on their front haunches. In fact, most of the dogs have a very, very heavy scab or hardcore place where they've been putting all of the weight of their body on their elbows. So this is not the posture that we're talking about, but rather laying on the side. There's a lot of medical benefit to laying on one side. That in fact, in the very beginning of the COVID, when they were killing so many people by putting on respirators, it's because in order to use the respirator, the people had to be laying on their back, which is not a good idea. And so the reason for that, by the way, is that if you've seen really deep anatomies like plastic bodies with all of the various parts put in there, you'll see that in fact the spinal cord is actually in the area so that it is deeper in the body than the lungs themselves, that the lungs are very, very close to the back of the body here. And as you begin to breathe in and watch and notice the body, you can begin to feel where the lungs are because of the touch of the cloth when the muscles and the rib cage expands. Now, if you're just having a very shallow breathing, you can't experience that. This is part of the reason why the Buddha has a long breath, to use controlled breathing so that you can begin to see what your lungs are doing. And a really good time to do that is when you're laying down. Now, in our culture, we lay down on soft mattresses, high, lofty beds, 8 inches of springs and cotton and coils, or maybe some air bed, or maybe some water bed, or whatever like that, trying to make the body comfortable because we're not taught how to lay comfortable on a hard surface. Now, part of the reason for that is because of the northern climate. Northern Europe needed to get off the floor because the floor was, especially the concrete floors, were very cold. And so getting off the floor was a wise idea because of the temperature. But here in the tropics, we actually want to lay on the floor because the floor is cool. And so this is part of the point. Someone would say, well, what's the issue about laying on a high and lofty bed? The answer, part of that has to do with, is because if you want to go traveling, do you have to carry your mattress with you? Or look at the fact that you've now got to go check into an expensive hotel just to get a bed when you could have laid on the street anyway. Or you could have found refuge in somebody's house or whatever. But when we have a guest over, we expect to give them a guest room with a bed. But Thai people don't. I have been in apartments in Bangkok where you could not walk across the room because of all of the kids that were laying on the floor asleep. And the story is that this family is so big that their apartment in Bangkok, at certain times a year, the people who are living in that apartment have to sleep in shifts. That when you're awake, it's better to be out of the apartment because the apartment is covered with sleeping bodies. But at least it's free room because the apartment belongs to the whole family. So going to that issue is that bodily comfort is not such an issue when you've got a comfortable bed to make the body comfortable. How can you learn to sleep if you want to? You can try sleeping on the floor or at least laying on the floor for a while and practice laying down on your side, practice laying down on your back, practice laying down on your chest. With full awareness, you'll really see the benefits of laying on one side. Now, the left side or the right side, not so important. There's actually, because of the physiology of where the lungs and the heart and all of that is, that it is kind of slightly better to lay on your left side than it is on the right side. But it really doesn't matter. But what you can do then is you now have two different postures that you can alternate from left to right. And I would recommend that throughout the night that you practice that so that you can get out of the habit of whatever the body is laying in, and that we give ourselves permission to lay in kind of any posture at all because the bed is soft, and instead looking for how to make the body itself comfortable without having the job being done by the bed. And then you can get back into the bed and get into that most comfortable posture. And now you've got the best of both worlds. Now you can have both the bed and your knowledge and of how to lay down so that you can rest. Now, some students will ask questions like, well, when you're laying on your side, what about the head? And I would say, well, the various photos and images that you'll find of all of this old statues show that the head is possibly best at an even angle so that you don't have any neck pain at all, which would require a small pillow. That in fact the Sangha robe was often used as a pillow. Or if you want to go hardcore Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, a slab of wood or something. And in fact, the robe itself can get pretty tightly packed. But you can also lay on your arm, you can put the pillow here, whatever it takes to get the body really, really comfortable. Then in fact, you can pull the cover up over also so that you find a way of getting the body really comfortable. And then you have kind of thoughts about, wow, isn't this nice? Every night, I really enjoy just laying here in the bed with no place to go and nothing to do. And it feels so good. And so this is a really good time to practice, if you want to call it practicing Ānāpānasati. It's also just a good way to go to bed at night. Yes. Somebody turn their mic on. Is that you, McGill? Did you say something?
No, it wasn't me.
Okay. All right. So I think that we've covered this particular topic fairly well. We can actually now take that whole point all around. That wherever you are, if you can remember, you can remember to have the thoughts of, wow, isn't it really nice right now? Things are really good right now. Everything is okay. No problems, no worries. Now you can do that while you're sitting in the dentist's office waiting to go to the chair. You can do that in the chair. You can do it in an electric chair. You can do it in any chair at all. Anytime you're sitting down, just that in fact, this would be a good practice that every time that one does sit down, we take a kind of a load off our feet. And so it would also be a good practice to also at that moment take a load off the mind. So every time that you go to sit down in a chair, this is a good point in time to remember to sit down and relax, to sit down and take those long, deep breaths for just a moment or two, get the mind back into a state of clarity, back into a state of being in the present moment with the thoughts of, well, right now I can just relax. Right now there's no place to go and nothing to do, and I'm just going to get the mind in a really good state. And so every time that we sit down, that would be a good opportunity to do it. And when you lay down in bed at night, do a really big, nice 10-minute session. So this is a way of bringing Ānāpānasati into our daily lives, is by having these triggers. A trigger of a chair. Every time that you sit down in the chair, you can sit down as if you were sitting down for a nice long meditation or a nice long nap. So we can also use the chair for the opposite, and that is, when do you get up? Whenever you get up. Why? I mean, you were sitting. Everything was easy peasy. There you are sitting in your chair, and all of a sudden you're out off the chair and stepping away, perhaps at a trot. Why? That in fact it reminds me of the joke is the refrigerator door. There the meditator is sitting on the floor in his meditation cushion and doing whatever meditators do. And the next moment he wakes up to the fact that he's standing with the refrigerator door open. Somehow he was able to mindlessly get up off the cushion and go to the refrigerator because that's where his mind had gone. His mind had gone to the refrigerator, and so the body went to the refrigerator, and he didn't even pay attention to that was what was going on. That we do a lot of stuff mindlessly. And so that point of getting up out of the chair is really easy, and we often get up. That in fact, some of you will even say, hey, I have gotten up and gone into the other room, and by the time I got there, I'd forgotten what it was that I went after. Took that long to just forget about it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to practice using the getting up as a new tool for practicing Ānāpānasati, to remember that when we get up out of the chair, then instead of getting up out of the chair into a walking posture, that we're going to go into that intermediate posture of standing. So when we get up out of the chair, the first thing we're going to do is stand. Often we even start walking just to maintain the balance. So we're going to have to actually put the effort to get out of the chair with the point of standing up, taking our balance and taking a second and reflect or ask the question or look in the mind to find the answer to the question of, why did I bother to get up out of the chair? What was the point? Why was I so dissatisfied that I had to leave? Because that's what the mind does. It jumps around. It feels so, wherever it is, it gets dissatisfied, and so it leaves. So why am I getting up? Why am I leaving? Where am I going? What's the point? When we begin to ask these kind of questions, that's what gives that whole point about the Buddha has you've heard about the law of karma. There's actually 4 laws of karma, not the ordinary 2. The ordinary 2 is good behavior gives good results and bad behavior gives bad results, but we already probably know that most behavior gives mixed results. That in fact the behavior determines whether the original or the outcome determines whether the behavior was a good action or not. An example of that was Will Smith really thought that hitting that other guy was a very good idea to hit him at that moment. Later, he had a lot of remorse. He decided that it wasn't such a good action after all. Okay. So the 4th law of karma, though, is the one of the action that is neither bright nor dark, and it gives results that are neither bright nor dark in the sense of out into the future, but it does bring the end of action. In other words, let's start taking actions that lead to the end of actions. And in this regard, we're actually taking the action of reminiscing or investigating why we got up out of the chair. If we will do that, we'll begin to see many times we'll have that thought before we get out of the chair, knowing that, okay, I'm getting out of the chair now intentionally, as opposed to mindlessly. And so we're going to be bringing a chair as a very, very good tool that we can use, both for sitting down in it. It's an anchor for just, maybe 1 minute, maybe even just 30 seconds of really happy, good moment. And if we do that, how many times did you get up out of a chair every day? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day? That gives you 50 times a day when you sit down to practice relaxing. And every time that we get up, same number of times, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day, we have an opportunity to reflect about our actions, about going places and doing things, so that we begin to watch. And as we begin to watch and taking that little effort to do, you'd be surprised at how much actual big, heavy duty effort you start to eliminate. Because things are not really all of as important as it was in the first place, that we mindlessly think things need to be done. We mindlessly think that things are important. And so we mindlessly go do them. And using the chair as your anchor, now we can do what we're going to do wisely because we're reflecting upon it. So this is how we begin to practice. We can do that even more subtly with just reaching out. You don't even have to stand up to go anyplace. There's just looking all the material items on your desk or whatever you've got in front of you. And when you pick up something, do so with the idea of, rather than, because when we pick up something and hold it in our hands, our mind is always on the object itself. What we can do is change that into mindfulness of the hand holding the object, rather than having our mind as with the intention of the object, what I'm going to do with this and all of that kind of stuff. Start to become aware of the hands holding the objects that we hold. Mindfully picking them up. When you pick up something, the first thing, like this tube, the first thing that we do is figure out where on our hand do we touch it first? Do we touch it with the pinky, with the thumb? Play with it, experiment with it. Watch every index or each finger as it begins to touch the object, so that you know how you're holding the object, because you know the position of the fingers. Or if you're holding it in your hand with your fingers wrapped around it, feel your hand. Be there with it. This is what they call mudras, and this is actually part of learning the body. And so this is this is all about Ānāpānasati with the breathing and the touch and the postures of the body and the hands, and using the body then and the movements and the movements of the body as anchors for sati to help us to wake up. So we're using the body as a new kind of tool, a tool for meditation, or let us say the tools. Your body is in fact the real tool that we have. Now I know some people are called a tool, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about it in the sense that the piano would be the tool that the musician is playing, or the carpenter has hammers and saws and nails and whatnot like that. So in this regard, we're going to be paying attention to the tool, which is the body itself, and we can put it to use in all kinds of ways by paying attention to what it is doing and paying attention to it, the body, doing those things. And we start with the breathing. That's where we start, is to start watching the body breathe, start getting in touch with the sensations of the body. Later, we can begin to do that with our hands so that we really pay attention to what the hands are doing. We begin to look at the tensions that we have in the body, and we become very, very attuned to the comforts of the body so that we can keep the body comfortable rather than agitated. So we can practice these various things. We can practice what we're doing with the hands. We can practice walking also. When you're walking, feel how hard the floor has left. Or when we're walking, is this a concrete floor, or is it a carpeted floor, or is it a wooden floor? Um, when you're in the house, walk barefoot so that you can pay attention to your feet. But in fact, when people talk to me about walking meditation, I says the most important quality of walking meditation is that you go barefoot. Why? Because when you're barefoot, you've got to watch where you're going. So spend a lot of time at home barefoot. That way you have to watch where you're stepping. And you can also, with the bare feet, you can get a texture of the floor, whether the floor is hard or soft, or whether it is cold, or what the condition of the floor is. By doing this, you also begin to walk more silently. You walk more slowly and more carefully and more quietly. And so this is part of the walking meditation, is to become silent, because you're paying attention to what you're doing. Somebody's got their hand up. Is that Todd? Okay.
Hi. Yeah, I just had two quick questions about the breathing. Do you only control the breath when you're doing like the seated Ānāpānasati, like formally, or do you also do it throughout the rest of the day when you're just, waking up? Do you control it?
I would recommend that every time you can remember to take a deep breath, take one. I probably do maybe in an hour, 100 times or so an hour. Just remember to take a deep breath.
Is it like, because I'm good with that, and my breathing tends to be kind of erratic. I tend to take very long, slow breaths, and then there are big gaps in between, but then I'll take kind of little short breaths in there, and it just kind of has this kind of weird natural cycle. But there have been times when I've tried to do like breathing exercises to lengthen it, and it's like almost like it's such a forced thing that it feels like I'm drowning. Like it actually has like an opposite effect of what's. So I don't know, like how strict should you be about really trying to keep every breath long? Is it okay to just
Strict.
let it be?
Me? Strict.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing it to calm down, it's hard to calm down when you feel like you're drowning. So
Exactly.
Be guided
Uh,
by the feeling of calm, and that'll kind of show you how your pace needs to even out.
Thanks.
right. We're not, we're, the culture is strict. The culture taught us to be strict. And we bring that restriction and the strictness into our practice. And sometimes it's really hard to let go of that, especially if the teachers are also trying to teach strict. Okay, but you can see that strict, the word itself has dukkha built right into it. Who is satisfied with strict? Parker, are you satisfied with strict? That would be maybe a hill too high for most to climb in their beginning. It's possible, yeah, for an old arahant, he can, when somebody else around him is strict, that's okay with him.
Thanks.
But you don't have to be strict on yourself, that we need to come out of that into a state of calm, into a state of relaxed. That in fact, that's the whole point of going to bed at night, is to recognize that people often go to bed to get sleep, but they go to bed unrelaxed. And so we're going to intentionally, when we go to bed, intentionally relax. With whatever happens is quite okay. I don't even have the tension of I've got to get to sleep, but rather we go to bed with the knowledge of, oh, I want to get all the sleep I need. I'll be fine. Okay. So in that regard, you're going to also, every time that you remember to take a deep breath, if you take a deep breath whenever you remember to take a deep breath, then instead of being strict with yourself, you're giving yourself a marvelous gift. But if you're having the thought of, oh, I should have already in the past had back then taken a deep breath, now that's being strict with yourself rather than saying, oh, well, never mind, we'll now we'll do. Let me take another deep breath right then. That's the way of practicing. So we're going to let the waking up be, in the beginning, there is more effort because the waking up is not so strong. But when we begin to wake up and it becomes more of a skill, we wake up so that the effort that it takes but is less. But part of the point about the effort being less is that not only are we developing the skills, but we're removing some of the psychological roadblocks about I'm bad at this, or I should have been doing it better, or maybe I should be more strict. So as all of that kind of melts away, it's not nearly so much effort anymore. It's even more relaxed. And then when we get that fourth item on the Eightfold Noble Path of the investigation, the sati, the waking up, the right effort, then we begin to change the attitude. Your whole attitude towards life is about to change from it's hard into it's easy. Everything is easy. Nothing to it. You've got it wired. Whatever comes your way, you can handle it quite well. All the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune just go whizzing right by you. You don't stand
What
in
did
the
you
way.
say? What are those secret? What's the four secret things? Like the secret ingredients to that attitude?
Attitude, right. Attitude is the fourth ingredient of the Eightfold Noble Path that begins to bring the mind together. The attitude of friendliness, the attitude of nurturing, the attitude of success. And so if you're completely successful, it's really easy for you to be friends. Mhm. And so this is all together is the attitude that we have, is the attitude of being able to win every time that you remember. Just wake up and you're a winner. Back into your daydreams, it might be a nightmare. Who knows what's going on if you go the old way, the way that we were trained. And so we're using these various things. We're using, first off, the big tool of seclusion to get away from all of the other people who were already in their own somnambulation and their own disappointments. Get away from them so that now the second is that we can get away from them in our own mind the way that we physically got away from them. And so the first thing is seclusion, getting away from it all. Laying in bed at night on your own, going to sleep is one place at time when you are on your own. So getting away from other people, getting out of communication and contact with other people there, how long it takes, whether you're in a meditation retreat or whether you're laying in bed or wherever you are, getting away from others is the best time to begin to practice. And what are we going to practice? Removing the rest of the society. The first thing is by walking away from the physical society. Now we're going to walk away from the society that we brought with us in our minds. All of the past, all of the future, all the rules, all the shoulds, woulds, coulds, all of the failures, all of the hard, all of that stuff. We're going to take a rest from that. And that's what Ānāpānasati is really all about, is learning how to properly rest. And one of the things that we're going to rest from is our thoughts that are just following along with society. Imagine that, in fact, you did live in a small hut in the woods. Never mind about mealtime. Let's not discuss that for the moment, but rather discuss the fact that you hardly ever saw anyone, and when you did, it was normally at a distance. What are you going to think about in that situation? You're going to think about the birds and the trees and the flowers, the breeze, and the things that are right in front of you. So let's start doing that in our society. I know that the society is very noisy, and it gives you a grand opportunity to pay attention to all kinds of things. And every one of them is screaming loudly that I'm important. But when we get away from all of that stuff, we recognize, well, it was important to those people. But if I'm there, then it's important to me too. But when I'm away from it, it's not important anymore. And so we want to practice that many times to get away from it all, number one, and then get away from it all, number two. And be here in the present moment. Be where we are. Be with the cicadas and the birds and the breeze and the flowers and the trees and just whatever you've got. You've got a room, at least you've got a room that's free from alligators and crocodiles. Got no worries, no flurries, no bothers. Some of you got red rooms, some of you got orange rooms, some of you got dark rooms. It doesn't matter what room you're in, you're safe, secure, and comfortable and unbothered. So these are the thoughts that we're going to have when we're away from other people. Safe and secure and unbothered. You don't have to plan on anything because you're already ready for everything. It seems like all of us spend our day as if we were going to some sort of interrogation or an interview. And we seem to have to get ready for every interview All day long, there's going to be interviewed, and I got to be on my toes. I got to be ready. I got to be prepared to do that interview.
I gotta be right.
Uh-huh. Exactly. Well, guess what? That's what everybody else is doing. Why do people have to think that when they're with me, they're being interviewed for a job or something? Instead, we can treat each other very comfortably, very easy, very happily, because we know how to treat ourselves very comfortably, very easily, very happily. So I use words like nourishing rather than critical, that we're often very critical of ourselves. Even in bed at night, oh, I've got to get to sleep. I've got so much work to do tomorrow. You see how critical that mindset is? If we go to sleep with that kind of mindset, that's what our night's going to be like.
What if we're excited to work on something that is, I've been experiencing a lot of not a negative desire, but an excitement and an enjoyment and a kind of a wholesome bliss about things to come, right? I'm kind of uncovering potential and powers that I didn't know that I had, and I have the possibility to do things I never thought I could do. And so I'm beginning to experience it's not necessarily a negative desire, like I want a Ferrari I can't have. It does relate to a kind of, it's not me thinking about the future. It's like I'm being present, and then the future is kind of revealed in a kind of a thought or a potential future. And I'm excited that it's revealing itself to me. And it's kind of like my mind is telling me that I could do this. And it's very positive, it's wholesome, it's all the good things that I experience in Ānāpānasati, but they are kind of relating to future things. It's not necessarily present. The thought is about the future, but it's wholesome and good. And so I was hoping we could maybe talk for a second about that difference in an unwholesome, negative dukkha kind of desire, and then when you're being present and your mind, because it still kind of is your brain or thought. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it seems like a different kind of thought that is a step in the right direction.
Okay, fine. Let's use this example. Imagine that grandmother is knitting a sweater. She's knitting the sweater for her grandson. And as she's knitting it, from time to time, she gives herself really, really wholesome thoughts about how nice he's going to look in the sweater and how he's going to appreciate it and love me. Okay? That's one way of doing it. Or she could be in a hurry. Oh, it's getting close to Christmas and I got to get this thing done and my hands hurt. And so it depends upon how we do things and the intentions that we're taking to do it. And so in that ordinary way, you're asking about a kind of an ordinary thing, but we do ordinary things. You've heard the Zen talk about that before enlightenment, I had to chop wood and carry water. And now that I'm enlightened, I chop wood and I carry water.
So this is like the result of the Ānāpānasati, is that because they feel so different, it feels like I've never had thoughts happen like this before, but is this the result of Ānāpānasati? Because it's just a weird experience. It's so new and foreign, but it seems like that this is a result of the wholesome thinking. It becomes natural and spontaneous, and like I didn't realize that's what it was at first.
The answer to that question is that the result, the answer is both yes and no. It's more of that this is just the process. That in fact, as you progress, more and more things will occur in the sense of, when we call it insight, what I mean is insight into the nature of dukkha, including the insight into the nature of being free from dukkha, and that we need to continue to experience that. We need to give ourselves a little yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay from time to time about how nice things are, but we don't stay in the state of yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay all the time. But there's another way of looking at it, and this is something that comes out of the Bible, where there is a passage that says, whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might, all thy strength, and all thy mind. In other words, put attention into it. Put intention, watch what you're doing, but do whatever that it is that needs to be done. And I would go so far as to say we can do it happily. If we can get away from it all and get the mind cleaned out and fixed up so that we can bring a joy and happiness easily, then when we go back into the world, we'll be able to bring that joy easily into whatever's happening. So imagine that you're in a cubicle among many cubicles, and the boss is walking down the hall. And all of those people in all of those cubicles, they become aware of the boss, and they know that he may be coming to see them, and everybody's tensed up and everybody's afraid, right? However, that's your choice. You can, in fact, be really glad to see the boss. And that if you greet him that way, whatever he had to say to you before he got to you will be easier for him and easier for you. But if you're uptight and tense when the boss comes, then that's how you're going to have that conversation. But if you're happy and joyful, and so you can take this example from the boss to just any place, the cops, wherever you go, if you can be joyful and happy on the inside of your mind, and you can greet those people with joy, happiness, friendship, caring, compassion, all of them gushy stuffs that you would want from, all the religions talk about all the really gushy stuff. But if you don't have the gushy stuff inside, how are you going to be able to have it come up when you need it the most, dealing with other people? And so this is the part of the practice of the waking up, using the body to help us wake up so that we can get the body comfortable, get the mind comfortable, and get our feelings comfortable. And then we can deal with the world comfortably.
Wow. Real quick, I'm kind of like, I don't know if this is the thing that we're trying to, but it seems like we're trying to live in the first jhana. Does that sound like something we're trying to do? We're trying to learn first jhana, or
don't tell that. That's a secret. Don't tell that.
okay, yeah, got it. Got the secret. Getting there. All right.
Yeah, that's a secret.
It's
in the sutras, by the way. It's a secret. It's in Sutta number 36. It's the story of the rose apple tree. How many of you know the story of the rose apple tree? Parker knows. Okay.
No.
So the story of the rose apple tree, it comes, the situation is that the Bodhisattva, the becoming Buddha, was practicing all kinds of things. He was the very best at jhana. He was the very best at austerities. And in fact, he was so good at the austerity, he was just about to kill himself. And he fell into a fast running creek, and he couldn't get out. And he struggled for a while, and then he lay there for a while, and then he finally got the strength and grabbed a hold of something, and he pulled himself out. And then during that process, he had the thought of what I am doing, I'm very best at, but it's not solving the problem. It just doesn't work. All of the jhanas, all of the heavy duty austerities, there's also the point, you've seen the statues of the fasting Buddha or the starving Buddha. Have you seen those? Okay, that's a little over representation, but he did do that kind of stuff. And so he recognized that those practices, even though he was good at them and was building a huge number of skills, still his skill set was not giving him the solution to the question that he was wanting to answer, which was satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And so he then had the thought about the memory of under the rose apple tree when he was young. He had already been taught a lot about the spiritual world. In fact, he had a spiritual guide, um, Kanda, who this guy is actually quite an interesting character. He was the one who, at the Buddha's birth, says that this child will not be a wheel-turning monarch. He's going to be an awakened one. He's going to be a spiritual leader. This guy also then became his tutor for his whole young life. And part that he was taught was all of the rites rituals and all of that of the Brahmins. And the Buddhas actually knew the Brahmin stuff better than the Brahmins did, because he was good at everything that he did and anything that he touched. He was really first class at it. He went whole hog at whatever he did. He went whole hog at training elephants. He went whole hog at training horses. He went whole hog in archery and other things like that because he was a prince. And part of the training that he got from Kanda was in meditation, in jhāna. Brahmins knew all about it, old stuff. And so now he's reflecting after he has gone all the way through all of the practices as deep as he can go. He reminisces that when he was a young man, he was actually able to practice the first jhana. And then he says, this is the path to enlightenment. And then he says, why have I been afraid of the pleasures of the mind? Because the real problem is the sensual pleasures, like getting drunk and going to the brothel and smoking this, that, and the other thing, and all of these kind of things that we do to find pleasure is different than the kind of pleasure that we can have directly with the mind. And so that's where the Buddha actually says, it's right there in the sutras, that the first jhana is the path or the method of enlightenment. Why? Because if you were in the first jhana, you were in a state of satisfaction. And his whole point was to learn to come out of dissatisfaction. That was his goal. Because when he was doing the jhanas, when he came out of the jhanas, he would, in fact, go back to hindrances. Didn't matter how deep into meditation he went, when he came out, he was back into ordinary mind state. Didn't matter how much he fasted and how much pain tolerance he could stand, he was still dissatisfied. And so he came to understand that, yes, bringing the mind into the state of satisfaction with these factors of the jhana, to where we're free from unwholesome states, we can apply the mind to the wholesome, sustain the mind on the wholesome, cheer ourselves up, get ourselves out of whatever mental funk that we might fall into, and be satisfied. This is actually over and over again, we practice that satisfaction, and then we get the attitude of, I've got this. That's the pity, the championship. It's the crown, or let us say, the cherry on top of the cake. We've got this. And so this is the quality of the first jhana. This is why I keep recommending practice to get yourself into a state of satisfaction over and over and over again, to get yourself into that state easily, and then to maintain it and maintain it and maintain it. Why? Because as long as you're in the first jhana, you are in that time enlightened. I mean, you're at least lightened up. You're cool. You're in nibbana. You're not hot. Okay. But our culture is with bottom lines and more is better. Then, oh, well, first jhana is not enough. I got to have second jhana. I got to have third jhana. I got to have fourth jhana. That's the mentality that we have, where the Buddha is very specific. Get yourself into and be able to maintain a beautiful state where you're watching what you're doing and you're enjoying your life, And that's all there much is to it. Except that it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and more joyful and more surprisingly beautiful. Because we're looking at how nice things are, we begin to recognize really how things really are that nice. It really is. I mean, what a marvelous planet we live on. It looks like not the planet itself was built for me, but I was built for this planet. And we fit into perfect harmony. It's our culture that tells us that we're not harmonious enough. You're already harmonious enough. Just appreciate how harmonious things are already. So yeah, the answer is walking around in first jhana. That's the way to go. Can you in fact get yourself into first jhana on the cushion and then stand up and stay and maintain first jhana? Can you turn around? Can you walk out of the room in first jhana? Where are you going to lose it? So begin to play with that, because that's how you're going to maintain it, is by watching it slip away and say, no, come back. I got you. Corey, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I really appreciate it. Whenever I was doing some of these practices today, I had a really amazing. It was periods of minutes, and like sometimes 15 minutes, or I was able to sustain it and walk around, which for me, that's the goal. And so I was able to kind of do it, but I didn't remember the 4 S's. And so I wasn't quite able to practice it in the way that you had. So if we could just touch on those 4 S's, I think satisfied and safe, and there was 2 other ones.
Oh, I didn't recognize it like that, because I always put a C in there of comfort. So safety, security, comfort, and satisfaction are the ingredients of the word sukha. Satisfaction is, in fact, the exact opposite of dukkha, which is dissatisfaction. But the components of that satisfaction is comfort, because you're not going to be satisfied if you're uncomfortable. So finding comfort, safety and security. If you feel unsafe, if you're in an insecure situation, then you're not going to be satisfied. You got to be on your toes or on alert for danger now. So part of what we're practicing here is to recognize that we're in the state of danger way too often. And then, in fact, the reality is there really is no danger except that which we talk ourselves into. Like, oh, I've got to go pay that payment, or oh, I've got to go to the bank, or oh, I've got to go to work, or oh, I've got to go. That's the whole point of the chair exercise, is when you stand up, look at all of that. I got to go. I got to do this. I've got to do that kind of stuff. Sometimes, in fact, students have said, you know something, I got up the other day, had that reflection, and I sat back down and just did some Ānāpānasati. I didn't need to go at all. And others will say, you know, I've been practicing that, and I get 10 steps away from the chair before I figure out that, oh, I'm going to stand before I. And the answer to that is, well, if you can remember, just stop and stand and reflect upon that. You're still wanting something. Yes, go ahead, Raul.
Hey, Dhammarato. So like there been times where I'm actually meditating or just sitting and chilling, where I'm like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, and I manage myself to stay there and just like, oh no, there's no flower, and like okay, it's cool now. But there are also times where I actually gotta do stuff, like okay, no, I get to deliver this to my boss and stuff like that, or I gotta wash the dishes, I gotta clean my room, I gotta do this, and so
Okay, wait a minute. Let's go to dishwashing for a second.
uh
You use the word, I gotta wash the dishes.
yeah,
Okay.
like they've been there
How
so long.
about having the thought, oh, I'm enjoying washing this dish?
Yeah, like that's what where I was going. Like I start doing like the same thing I do with my meditation. Like, this is okay. Like, this is okay. Like, no, I don't got to do anything else. Like, I can just chill and I can just go here and stay here and enjoy this moment. And so I start doing the same thing with the whole other stuff that I've been doing. Like, I'm enjoying this. Like, but I'm enjoying this, and there's no problem. Like there's nothing going on. Like, it's safe. It's okay. So, like, well, that's prior to doing it. But when I start doing it, it's like, this is nice. Like, I can
Mhm.
pay attention to washing the dishes. Oh, I can pay attention to doing my work. Like, oh, I can pay attention to making my bed. Oh, this is nice. So I find it nice to go ahead and expand. Sorry. So to expand this when I do this in my meditation, then expand it to mundane task. I don't know how to call it, like to to normal life, to life itself. I
Actually,
don't know.
to life. That in fact it won't be normal anymore because normal life is somnambulitic.
Yeah. So
It's sleepwalking and it's got dukkha in it and all of the stuff that goes with it. So, in this regard, we can say that we are now having life, but we're having it abundantly. Okay, that when we think of it in Christian terms of everlasting life, they get the idea of a clock's everlasting life in the sense of I'm still alive after I die. But a much better way of looking at everlasting life is, yeah, this moment I'm alive. This can last. I can last to the next moment too. Okay, that it keeps lasting and keeps lasting and keeps lasting. It's everlasting life because I keep practicing. So when is it everlasting? Every time I remember that it's everlasting. Here I am, still alive. Isn't that marvelous? Wow, I can take a deep breath. But the other kind of everlasting life actually has a quality of, but this ain't it yet. That I will have everlasting life, but this ain't good enough. I'm
mm.
not quite satisfied with this one. So the question then is, can we become satisfied in this moment and have really abundant life right now? And practicing that over and over and over again. That's what it takes, the over and over again quality. We have to keep going over and over and over again because we've already built up all the habits of dissatisfaction. Because why? Because we did it over and over and over and over again. And so that's the repetition. And when do we do it? Whenever we remember, knowing that our when do we remember is a skill that we're going to build up so that we remember often. And every time we remember, we can take a deep breath. So we can focus on that. Every time I remember, I'm going to take a deep breath and then clean out the mind and have a wholesome thought. If you did that and did it every time you remembered, you don't need any other kind of meditation. That's enough. Just take a deep breath, clean your mind out, come to the present moment. Yes, Todd.
I was just wondering, so, and I can see how, a lifetime of this sort of thing would be very helpful, like at the moment of death. But I was wondering, is there any kind of, I don't know, enhanced practice that you would use at the moment of death? Like you're having a heart attack, you're, you know, the initial thing, your body panics, whatever. Is there something else that you would recommend for that, or just hope that you have years of this practice ahead of time.
Well, let me ask you that question this way, then. Would you rather be having a heart attack and in the process of dying and being uptight and tense about it? Or would you rather be having a heart attack and being at the point of death and be completely satisfied that, yeah, this is the time to go?
That's what I would like to happen. I just know from past history, not of dying, but of, being in extreme pain after surgery or having, some other really thing that all of a sudden, like, I'm telling myself what I should be doing, and yet, like, that just doesn't come online. Like, there's something else, takes over.
Mostly, at least anecdotally, they haven't. I don't think they have the capability of doing the research. It's really hard to have people all hooked up to all the medical equipment at the point of death. They have been able to do that occasionally, but normally the anecdotal information is that when people have a heart attack, it's because their heart is being very stressed right then and there. Okay. One of the ways is too much exercise. Another one is having sex. That in fact that happens to too many prostitutes. The guy drops dead right on top of her. Okay. And other times like that. So you mentioned heart attack, and my questioning now is, how did you get yourself into a position so that you and your heart were such enemies that your heart attacked you?
Well, I'm trying to avoid it, but my father died of one at 44, and his father died of one at 45, and they found out like 7 years ago that I have, like, very high risk of it so I've done everything I can physically beyond that. Thankfully, I have a very different lifestyle. I have a very different emotional state. My life, thankfully, is very
Oh,
relaxed, and I'm
so
doing all
maybe
this.
it wasn't the genes that attacked their heart, which attacked them. Maybe it was their lifestyle.
That's my hope. Yeah. But on
No,
the other,
don't make it a hope. Make it your understanding. Hope is kind of, oh gosh, spit in one hand and hope in the other and see which one fills up. Okay. But you can look, an example of that is, yes, my dad did die at the age of 65, which is the typical time of death. But he was a heavy smoker and a drinker, and he worked with asbestos when he was, gosh, in his middle ages, and so he had all the contributing causes to an early death. My grandfather died at the age of 59, but he also was a heavy smoker, and so not smoking and not drinking and having an easy lifestyle is a guarantee then that you could probably live right on. But if you hassle yourself about worrying over a heart attack, it might take the hint and attack you.
totally, totally. But I was, and so I tried. That's not kind of in my plan. I think I'm doing everything right. But I feel like no matter what happens, if whenever unless we luck out and die in our sleep, there's always going to be that moment of, oh, this is it. This is going, and so I'm wondering if what beyond just the trying to take a deep breath if possible, of gladdening the mind in some way, is there
Gladdening the
anything
mind
else
by saying, I can handle this. Okay. That I would recommend getting yourself into a medical place. I mean, I have been there where the EMT, the ambulance, or whatever, the meat wagon, they've been trying to get me to go to the hospital. And I say, I'm not going to ride with you in your meat wagon to the hospital. Not going to go. There's been a while since that's happened, but because in the last time, because I'm in Thailand and because I'm practicing the way that I practice, when Tam says, no, you are going to get into that ambulance and you are going to go to the hospital, I say, yes, ma'am. Yes, but times have changed, and I'm willing to let the medical stuff be as it may. So I would never recommend to you to, let us say, happy mind yourself out of a heart attack.
Sure.
But you can happy mind yourself while you're getting the heart attack attended to. And the best way to attend to the heart attack yourself is by not getting yourself into a position of having one.
Yep.
That's the very best way of going. Is that knowing that that there are certain things that you can do, so you do it and congratulate yourself. Hey, I've got this wired. And you'll probably die some other way. There's a lot of different ways of dying. Your
There
choice.
are.
How would you choose to die?
In my sleep, preferably. I think that would be me.
Okay. I would actually like to be awake for it. I don't want to die in my sleep. I would rather be quite awake and watch it happen. Happily. I don't want to miss such an event as that. I mean, we don't ever get a chance to die often, and here you are wanting to sleep right through it. I don't get that.
That's true.
I
It
think
only
what you're
happens
saying
once.
is you want to avoid the pain.
I think the pain and the possible fear of, you know, of the unknown, I think is an issue yet.
I know. So instead of having the fear of death, have the attitude of, let me at it. Let me at it. I've had enough of this. I want to find out what's really going on. Let me know. I want to see. All right. Then you're not afraid. You can be eager for your own death. And then it gets really elusive. I mean, that's the hardest thing I've ever tried, was dying. I've not been able to do it yet. And I want to watch it happen.
That's great. Yeah, I've gone through periods of my life where that seemed like the reasonable thing to, you know, the reasonable attitude, and then it's like I kind of wonder, like in that moment, is it just going to be like a panic switch that goes on instead, and you know, all
Well,
that goes into my brain.
plan on it. Think about all the different ways that you could die. Think about it. Think about them strapping you to the chair and giving you the juice like they did in California back in the 50s. Think about the electric chair. What's it going to be like for you to get fried? How about hanging? What would it be like for you to get hung?
Yeah.
How about starvation? What would it be like to actually have to starve to death? What about having your guts blown out and you got your intestines in your hand? You're watching all the blood and everything gush right out. And then the fade and the darkness comes, okay? Actually, the fade and the darkness is going to come no matter which way you actually die,
Mhm.
okay? But you can have I mean, I can't think of, I mean, CNN is not nearly as entertaining as my own death. And so we can take it, then death becomes a sport. Death becomes a toy to play with. But they talk about it in the some scriptures about death has no sting. Got no sting, got no fear. That's conquering death, is not that you survive all cases of death, but rather that you can handle death quite happily. That's conquering death. Because if you can conquer death in your mind now and continue to have the attitude that you can handle that, then what else is your problem? All problems become trivial. That in fact, the only reason why things are important to us is because we think of them as a survival issue. Oh, I can't survive without her or that. Right? And so this is why we make things important. When we recognize, hey, if I'm not important, my own death is not, there's nothing to it, then why do I cling so much to make everything else so important when nothing's really important? Why don't I enjoy my life rather than making everything important? So taking the criticism, take the importance out, just everything's already okay. Hey man, go ahead and die. It's all right. Nothing to fear. So, what do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, does anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah, it was great seeing you.
All right.
I had
Well,
one other.
Go ahead, Corey.
Well, I had one other question that I wanted to go over. Whenever I was doing some concentration and practices today, like the mind, I would have the intention to focus on something and concentrate on something, and my mind would keep doing the mindless thing. It would keep on going to my head would just turn, and I didn't have the intention to turn. So I had the intention to stay focused on the object that I chose to focus on. But the mind kept looking away, and it kept searching for the pleasure. So the thing that I was going to meditate and reflect and think on later on today is, why is pleasure so addicting? And why does our mind constantly seek pleasure? Or I call it pleasure because that's essentially what it feels like. It feels like what I'm concentrating on isn't pleasurable enough. So maybe I'm not doing the first jhana, but this kind of addiction of pleasure is one thing. And then the other thing is that the deeper issue is the ego, or the idea of ourself somehow relates to pleasure. And or it's kind of like this fundamental issue of comfort. It's like the ego has the appearance of being comfortable. There's something to do with ego and comfort, and that relates into like why the mind is always seeking comfort in these places that don't actually have comfort. So it's kind of a compound issue. And I was like, it just I don't have any good answers yet, but I'm looking into it. But
All
hopefully you
right.
can.
Here's a way of starting off with this. You've probably heard of the old song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. All right. Now, well, let us use the word pleasure in the sense of either things are pleasurable or not pleasurable. Another way then of discussing it would be things are either unsatisfying or dissatisfaction, or we're in a state of satisfaction, which is you're calling pleasure. And the Buddha says that. Why would he be afraid of the pleasures of first jhana? Because the pleasures that, even the Christians there, they call it carnal pleasure, or the pleasures of the body, or sensual desires. This, the things that we have as products, beautiful objects, beautiful women, beautiful cars, beautiful this, that, or the other thing, because we take delight in the mind's eye with those objects. The question is can you take delight with your mind's eye without it being focused on those objects that then you would want? In other words, why don't we focus on the things that we do already have as pleasurable, the things that actually do exist right now? Because the opposite is going to be being displeasurable or uncomfortable or unsatisfied. So, yes, this is not only a state that we were looking for, but this is what the whole path of the Buddha is all about, because we feel, all of us mostly, as being unsatisfied. We're not, let us say, we're not willing to just relax into satisfaction. We've got to go do something to get it.
Wow.
So
I just had a revelation. You want to hear it real quick?
All right.
So something about the ego is identification with the body, and the body gets pleasures, because essentially when we talk about pleasures of the body, these are like aesthetic things or drugs that make the body feel pleasurable, and we don't have to do any work for them. So the ego is essentially a kind of a faulty identification with the body. We believe we are the body. That's when we talk about ego, that's what we're talking about, is this sense of belief or understanding that we are the body, or that we're somehow related to the body. And then somehow that seems to factor into this whole equation, right? Essentially, the pleasures of the body is kind of facilitating satisfaction without really doing any work. And then it seems to be like, because it's so easy, everybody likes, you don't want to do the work, right? Everybody wants to just have the status. We want to get satisfied without doing the work. Right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly why. Here's a clear example of that. It's called the chick magnet. A particular car that the young guy thinks that if I had that car, I could get all the girls that I wanted. I can't go get girls by myself. I'm not good enough. But if I had that car, then I could get a girl. All right. That's exactly the mentality that we're talking about here, is looking for something to make like a drug, to make my pleasure easy or possible, rather than recognizing, no, we can get that pleasure easy. It's quite possible. You've already got it if you just let yourself have it. Here it is. Stop being dissatisfied or wanting the chick in order, because in fact, we want the car to get the chick, but we want the chick to feel good. So why do we have to go through the car and the girl to feel good, where in fact, by the time we've got to deal with that car and its payments, we got to deal with that girl and that woman, where's all of our pleasure anyway?
Yeah.
So let's not try to go get pleasure from the outside world. Let's go get it directly. By talking ourselves into it. By recognizing everything's already okay. I don't need the girl. I don't need that car. I'm okay right now.
And the reason why it feels so, I say hard, but it's because that's how it feels. And what we're really talking about is a kind of imbalance where the body is prioritizing, the body is kind of addicted to, or our mind is kind of addicted to the easy pleasure. And when I say easy, it's essentially a zero pleasure. You don't have to do any work at all to get you just have to do the drug, or you just have to be around the woman. And
Except that,
Ānāpānasati,
except that getting that drug is not all that easy, and being around that woman and pleasure is not all that easy. So it's not an easy pleasure anyway. That's why we're looking for love in all the wrong places, because you think that the wrong places is going to be easy, and you take it and they're not easy, and there's no love there. This is the whole point that the Buddha, in fact, your question is exactly the Buddha's question when he was asking under the rose apple, or when he was reflecting upon the rose apple tree, why am I afraid of going after the pleasure directly? Why not just get it directly? Why do we have to go through, in his case, all of those austerities, or in his case, all of those jhanas or whatever that he's going to do? To
because
just
inherent in it.
relax and be satisfied.
Yeah. But we have the identification with the body, and when we think we are the body, essentially that, I think I'm going to try to answer that question in meditation and reflection, but it seems like the barrier, why am I afraid? It's because that faulty illusion, the faulty identification with the body, realizes that it might die if we learn how to give ourselves pleasure. So there's almost like this, it puts up the fight of its life to try and defend. It gives you all these pleasures and ideas and desires, but it seems like that there is some kind of, it's not a real death. It's kind of like a illusion in the mind, but it's kind of like a battle.
Let us call it a sense of loss, a
Mhm.
sense of losing something, which happens a lot. One of the things that I'd like to back up on is that, yes, you are absolutely correct, Corey. We identify, I am the body. But we identify with not only I am the body, but I am the feelings. And we also identify with I am the thoughts, that this is how I think. This is therefore me. And because I think that, what I'm thinking is true. And so we identify with the body, we identify with the feelings, and we identify with the mind and the thoughts. But when we can begin to recognize that I am not the thoughts, nor the thinker, I'm the observer. And then we recognize, wait a minute, the thoughts and the thinker and the observer are still just observations. There's no even an observer there. There's just the observation and the thoughts and the feelings and the body. That's all there, but I'm not any of that stuff. I'm just a moving target. And I'm the one who is enjoying it in the moment or not, my choice. And so, in that regard, the self is actually really a moving target. It's all over the place. We're not fixed, and yet we think that we're fixed because the body is actually quite long lasting. But I would like to point out, look how many industries in our society are in business and have a something going because of all of the other people that do identify with I am the body. I mean, when you go to buy an article of clothing, you identify with I am the body. So the fashion industry, the clothing industry, the shoe industry, they're all catering to I am the body. How about the cosmetic industry? How about the weightlifting and gym industry? I am the body. We could even go so far as to much of medical science now as I am the body with Botox and cosmetic surgeries and all that kind of stuff. But then we have the old style of medicine, I am the body, with all the hypochondriacs. My mom was a hypochondriac. She would take me to the doctor at the drop of a hat. And so I got used to doctors having to deal with me when I knew what was better for me than they did. There was no reason to go to the doctors. But anyway, back to the whole point is, look how much identification there is with I am the body. We've got all of these industries that, in fact, you could go so far as to say even Tesla is I am the body because I want to put my body in that car and have my body go someplace. So that's almost all of industry has to do with I am the body. I wonder what about the news industry? That's the I am my feelings. So we identify with all kinds of things as I am this and I am that, where in fact, whatever it is, you're not that. Let's not worry about who you are. Let's worry about what you are not. Because what you are not is dukkha. And anytime that you identify with something, that's the dukkha. But you're not any of those things. And so this is why the Buddha recommends that it's unwise attention to pay attention to who am I, but it's better to pay attention to this is dukkha, and this is the cause of dukkha, and this is the end of dukkha, and this is how I get myself out of that dukkha with this breath. And by staying with the Four Noble Truths over and over again, let's actually go so far as to say we're even going to make the issue of who am I irrelevant, because who you are is irrelevant. Who you are doesn't mean anything, because any way that you identify or define yourself, you're still subject to the Four Noble Truths. Many people identify themselves as who am I based upon their profession. Weightlifters will identify themselves more as I am the body. Beauty queens will identify themselves as I am the body. But most of us will identify as I am an intellectual, or I am a thought process. So I'm an engineer, or I'm a coward, or I'm a hero, or I'm a this, that, or the other thing. To where, in fact, no, Any moment that you're a coward, there's going to be moments when you're not. Anytime you're a hero, there's going to be moments that you're not. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. So let's not worry about who we are. Let's worry about how this whoever we are, which is not anything much at all, is at least free from suffering. And so that's the insight into ego. The insight into ego is nothing to it.
Thank you for everybody for allowing me to have a lot of talks and conversation. Hopefully it was insightful or beneficial to other people. And thank you, Dhammarato, for taking the time and helping me out with some of these things I've been working on. I appreciate it.
I'm having a ball. I'm having a blast here. You don't have to thank me. I'm the one who's enjoying this as much as anybody. The pleasure is all mine, so they say.
All right. I'll share it too.
All right. Yes. So you guys, I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. Raoul, you're still on, and Robert, I haven't seen anything of you, Robert. You're still there, I suppose. I guess he's not. Okay. So, Parker, do you have any last comments or anything to say before we finish?
It might be beneficial to some of you. We just finished uploading the videos as podcasts, or people watching this video on the YouTube. That the Dhammarato Dhamma YouTube videos are now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and other podcasting services.
Oh, wow. Cool.
That's great. Thank you, Parker.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
great.
I'm following.
Okay. I was going to hopefully hear from Parker, excuse me, Robert, but I guess that he's not going to be here with us right now. So anyway, I thank you all very much. This has been a very happy and joyful conversation. We've covered quite a lot about the body and how to use the body to help wake us up. But the last thing that we can say is, and to wake up to, you are not the body. Whoever you are, you're not it. That's not who you are. So thank you, guys.
Thank
We'll
you.
see.
God bless.
We'll see you. Okay, bye-bye.
We'll be seeing
Bye.
you. Cheers.